If the ocean dies, we all die. And so we found that we were selling 20 times as much of the new logo with the Jolly Roger. If you take a look at Greenpeace, of which I was a co-founder of, they bring in about 400 million euros a year. And in comparison, we bring in 15. Well, we have 12 ships. They have 3 ships. So it's not the money, it's the passion that makes us successful. Well, the media only understands the 4 elements, which are sex, scandal, violence, and celebrity. And every story has one of those elements. The more elements you have, the bigger the story. If it's not on camera, it didn't really happen. I'm not really concerned about people's criticisms. It means nothing to me. My clients are not people. My clients are whales and seals and dolphins and sharks. And, those are who I represent. So if people like what we do or they don't like what we do, I don't really care.
Bonjour, and welcome to Mission First, the podcast to get inspired and to learn from successful entrepreneurs who are building a sustainable future for our planet and its people. I am Gilles Toussaint, your host and the founder of GT Impact, a growth and digital marketing agency working only with companies making a positive difference in this world. Growing a company that aims at having a sustainable impact is not easy. That's why I created Mission First. In each episode, I interview one entrepreneur who has a sustainable mission and who has recently gone through the difficult first years successfully. Together, we discuss their challenges and what they have learned on the way. We go into detail with a specific focus on company culture, leadership, financing, growth, and business strategy. That way, you'll learn hands-on tips on how to build a better future and a successful company too. Today, our guest is Captain Paul Watson, who was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace. In 1977, he left that organization to create Sea Shepherd. For more than 40 years, Sea Shepherd has been defending the oceans, saving the lives of thousands of whales, and fighting against illegal fishing. Today, I'm incredibly honored to have the chance to learn more about his fantastic story and experience building the biggest non-governmental navy in the world. Among others, we discussed his experience with branding, how they came up with a new flag logo, and how it tremendously impacted their revenue. We talked about how they maximized their operations efficiency, how they avoided any paid promotion and instead had people choosing to join them. We talked about his first steps to fund and kick off Sea Shepherd at the beginning, as well as how they set the organization administration and operations in such a way that it is an international movement with independent entities working on their own campaigns. We talked about leadership, passion for the mission, and how they find and recruit their volunteers and crew members. We spent a long time at the end talking about his communication strategy and the tactics they use to get so many TV documentaries filmed about their cause. We discussed also positive and negative press, haters, and how far you can go to get media attention. If you want to have a lesson on communication strategy, leadership, and how to grow one of the most charismatic and impactful NGOs of the world, this episode is for you. Welcome to this podcast, Mr. Watson. To start on the right foot, how should I call you? Captain Watson, Mr. Watson, Paul?
Captain, Paul, it doesn't really matter.
Okay, then how are you doing, Paul?
I'm doing fine.
So, we are in a weird situation right now with coronavirus. Are the crews of the Sea Shepherd vessels locked down too, or are they still traveling the world to defend the oceans now?
Well, they are locked down, not by choice, but because they're quarantined in the various harbors where they are, so we can't really leave. It's hard to refuel them, hard to provision them. But they're being maintained and ready to move as soon as these quarantines are lifted.
Okay, so you're still working hard.
Well, there's no rest when you're on the ships because they always have to be maintained, from morning to night.
How many ships and vessels do you have right now? Because I read that you have it's right now the biggest non-governmental navy in the world that you have.
We have 12 ships, so at any given time there's about 240 volunteers on those ships.
240 volunteers and 12 ships. So to start this podcast, I must tell you that I was really excited and honored to have the chance to interview you for one particular reason. I grew up like watching the documentaries from the Commandant Cousteau a lot. I'm Belgian, and so I'm a big fan of the oceans, and I have so much respect for your dedication and what you have accomplished for the defense of the marine life. So thank you very much for that. I wanted just to give a few numbers to our listeners. Your direct action campaigns have prevented, I read, the slaughter of like thousands of whales, and you've helped reduce Japan's whaling quota from 1,000 whales a season to less than 300 a year. And if I'm not mistaken, you said recently you caused them so much loss that they pulled themselves away from whale fishing as research activities in 2019.
We prevented them from killing 6,500 whales. We've cost them over $150 million. And this year, they are no longer down there and they won't be returning. So the first time in the history of whaling, there's no whaling taking place in international waters, in pelagic waters. And whaling is now restricted to the territorial waters of Norway, Japan, Iceland, and Denmark, with Norway now being the largest whaling nation on the planet.
Okay. And you were going to have some campaigns in Iceland soon?
We had a campaign in Iceland last summer and no whales were killed. And so we're still opposing Icelandic whaling, and most likely this summer we'll see what happens. But whaling is a dying industry, and since 1977 when we began, we pretty much eliminated 95% of all whaling operations, and it's only a matter of time before the remaining ones just stop being. It's a very archaic industry, and world opinion is very much against it.
Thank you very much and congratulations for all your efforts and paying off right now for that. My first question might be pretty surprising to you, and it's not related to Sea Shepherd, but I'm really curious. I guess you might have 1,000 interview requests every day. You don't know me. I write you out of the blue and explain you what this podcast is about. And I was surprised that you said yes. So I'd like to ask you, why did you accept to participate to this podcast?
Well, I'll try to speak to as many people as possible. Omar, who's my assistant, he gets these requests, and then he asked me to do so. So I, like tomorrow, I have a short interview with a high school student, and from, where's she? I think she's from Mexico, actually. And, so I try to reach as many people at their request as possible.
How much are you trying to build credibility by educating the people beside the awareness on the campaigns on themselves?
Well, we're not involved with building credibility at all. We're trying to get messages out that the ocean is in trouble and we have to defend it. So it's really not about building up Sea Shepherd. It's more about getting that message out. I mean, we can sum up the message very simple in one sentence. If the ocean dies, we all die. And so this is all about making sure that we survive into the future. And we're only going to do that by defending our life support system, which is the ocean.
And we just talked about the whale protection campaigns. But as you said, it's only a part of it. And luckily, it's coming to an end so slowly. So could you tell us a bit more about what are the different activities that you have?
Most of our activities right now are involved around going after poachers, illegal fishing, unregulated fishing. So we're working in partnership with governments in Africa and in South and Central America. And these partnerships are rather unique. It's for an NGO to partner with a government. Like, for instance, right now we're partnering with Tanzania, Namibia, Gabon, Ghana, São Tomé, Liberia, Togo, Cape Verde. And what happens is we provide the resources and they provide the authority, which allows us to intervene, intercept, and seize poaching vessels. So we've seized over 52 poaching ships off of the African coast. And we're also in partnership with Mexico, Colombia, and Ecuador, and Peru. And what we're doing there is the same thing, going after poachers. In Mexico, we have a partnership with the Mexican Navy to stop poachers in the Sea of Cortez, specifically the Totoaba poachers, the ones who are contributing to the extinction of the endangered vaquita, which is the most endangered and smallest porpoise in the world. And because of our efforts over the last 6 years, the vaquita did not go extinct. I'm quite confident it would if it wasn't for the fact that we've confiscated over 1,000 nets. That's over 150,000 meters of nets. and have prevented them from setting those nets in the Vaquita refuge.
So there was a time where governments were not super supportive of your actions, like calling you pirates, for example. And I'm thinking about Japan, who were really not happy about what you were doing with the whale industry. So when did you see a change where government started to request working in partnership with you?
Well, our first partnership was with Ecuador and protecting the Galapagos Marine Reserve, and that began in 1999. So we've been 20 years now in that partnership. We've provided patrol boats. We have set up legal classes. We've set up an AIS system to monitor all of the ship movements in the Galapagos National Park. We've trained and deployed a canine unit to catch wildlife products from being smuggled out and to prevent exotic species from being smuggled in. That is a species which can endanger the habitat there. But in 2015, what happened is we went after the ice fishing fleet off the coast of Antarctica. It's Chilean sea bass is what the Patagonia toothfish is. And, these people have been operating there for a decade without anybody intervening against them. There were 6 poaching vessels led by the most notorious of them all, called the Thunder. And we decided to go after them because Australia and New Zealand and Interpol hadn't been able to do anything about them. So we went after them, and within 8 days, we found the most notorious vessel, the Thunder. And as soon as it saw us, it dropped its nets and ran, thus starting a pursuit that lasted 110 days, the longest pursuit in maritime history. As the Bob Barker, our vessel, chased the Thunder from the coast of Antarctica up into the Indian Ocean, then around and halfway up the Atlantic coast of Western Africa, before the Thunder captain sank his own ship to prevent it being captured because he was being forced to go into a port for lack of fuel. But meanwhile, back in Antarctica, our vessel, the Sam Simon, came in and confiscated that net, that illegal net. It was 72 kilometers long, weighed 70 tons, and that was the evidence that we had on their illegal activities. After sinking their ship, the captain and the 2 officers were sent to prison. But during that pursuit, we developed a partnership with Interpol. And since then, that's what led to our partnership with all these other governments. So I think it was in the front page of the New York Times where there was the article on our chasing of the Thunder, and Secretary of State of the United States, John Kerry, at the time was quoted as saying, "Thank God for Sea Shepherd." The reason being is that as a non-government organization, we don't have our hands tied with bureaucratic red tape. So we can go in and do what governments can't do because there's so much bureaucracy encumbering their operations.
So you're much quicker to react.
Yeah. And as for being pirates, governments have never really called us pirates. Our opposition, the illegal whalers, the illegal fishing operations, they're the ones that call us pirates. And back in the 90s, when they were calling us that, I said, okay, well, if you want to call us pirates, we'll be pirates. And we got our own pirate flag. So you can call us whatever you want. But what we're really doing out there is upholding international conservation law. Sea Shepherd doesn't break laws. We uphold laws. We have an unblemished record of nonviolence. We've never caused an injury to a single person. Back in the 1970s, when I set up Sea Shepherd, I developed a strategy which I call aggressive nonviolence. We're very aggressive, but we make sure that we don't cause any personal injury to any person at all. And that's been a record that we've upheld, and we're very proud to continue.
So that's regarding the flag. It's great that you mention it right now. How important do you care about branding on what was the decision? Why did you come up with that flag, and how much do you care about the branding of Sea Shepherd? For example, the guidelines for all the people working for you. Do they have to wear the Sea Shepherd equipment the whole time?
Well, the flag, or the branding as you call it, sort of branded itself. I mean, we came up with the flag in response to being called pirates, because every pirate back in the 17th century had their own Jolly Roger. So we came up with that flag, and it sort of people liked it. We would put that logo on our T-shirts, and we had a classical logo of a humpback whale and a dolphin. And so we found that we were selling 20 times as much of the new logo with the Jolly Roger. And the merchandising program is important to us because it provides us with a lot of funds in order to operate their ships, about $3 or $4 million a year. So that's a big contribution to the maintenance and operation of the vessels. But in designing the flag, I did have a purpose behind it. The black represents the oblivion of extinction. The skull represents humanity as responsible for driving these species into extinction. The yin-yang of the humpback and the dolphin in the forehead of the skull represents the mind in the ocean, or other words, that peace can be found through ecological harmony in the ocean. And underneath we have the cross, shepherd staff, and the trident. So the shepherd staff for protection, the trident represents aggressive protection. So that's the symbology behind the flag. So it's a classic Jolly Roger flag. Like I said, every pirate had their own flag. It's an interesting name, the Jolly Roger. It comes from the French Jolly Rouge, which was originally the pretty red, because the original flags were actually red and white, not black and white, but that's how it evolved.
Oh, wow, that's a real piece of art. So you said you sold 20 times more after changing the flag. Did that happen directly the year after?
Oh, right away. Especially young people loved it. I mean, it's a very popular logo, and it's gone on many things. I mean, we've had companies approach us to use it. So we have it on whiskey, and we have it on beer, and we have it on shirts, and we have it on, all kinds of things like that. But it all contributes to raising the funds to operate the ships.
That's a great story. And regarding the funding right now that you're talking about it, what are the different types of funding, and what's the proportion of the different fundings?
When I set up Sea Shepherd, I made sure that we weren't going to, we're not going to spend people's money on direct mail. We're not going to spend it on hiring people to stand on corners with clipboards. We're not going to spend it on ads. We're going to spend it on campaigns, on operation of the ships and campaigns. And if people want to support us, they come to us. And our membership as a result has grown very, very slowly in comparison to other organizations. But what we can say is that 100% of the funds that we raise goes to our campaigns. We don't have to pay for that overhead. We don't have to pay for all those fundraising operations, which makes us more effective. And also, it means that there's less possibilities of compromise. We don't have to satisfy people. We don't have to be everything to everybody. We are who we are. If people don't support us, then that's fine. That's their choice. They don't have to support us. People join us. We don't join them, is what I'm really trying to say.
Okay, so donation is one way, and volunteering is like one of the other way to basically help your company.
Yes, the majority of our people on our ships are all volunteers, and we couldn't do it without them. It's their passion, their courage that makes our campaigns successful. So our money comes from donations, from merchandise sales, from fundraising events. And it's not very much. I mean, if you take a look at Greenpeace, of which I was a co-founder of, they bring in about 400 million euros a year. And in comparison, we bring in 15. Well, we have 12 ships. They have 3 ships. So it's not the money. It's the passion that makes us successful.
Oh, wow. Now that you're talking about Greenpeace, I would like to just take a step back and go back at that time. So you were one of the co-founders of Greenpeace.
Yes.
Can you summarize again why you left Greenpeace at the time?
I don't believe in protesting, and Greenpeace is a protest organization. I find protesting to be very submissive. You just hang banners and take pictures. So I wanted to intervene. So I set up Sea Shepherd as an interventionist organization. And that's what we are. We intervene. We take pictures, but we also stop the people we're taking pictures of. And that's the difference.
And how did you proceed at that time? So you go back, you say, okay, I'm leaving Greenpeace. And what are the first steps until you create your first campaign? How do you find the first people you are going to work with?
Well, I had built up contacts while I was with Greenpeace, and the first thing I needed was a ship. I first approached Cleveland Amory and the Fund for Animals in the United States, and he provided me with the funds to buy the ship. And then I approached the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in the United Kingdom, and they provided us with money for our first campaign to protect seals off the east coast of Canada. So it's rather ironic that we're the most radical group around, but we were actually initially funded by two of the very most conservative groups around. But after we got the first ship and we started doing campaigns, and more people were attracted to what we were doing, and we've grown slowly ever since. But I think that we've grown in a way which has kept ourselves credible and non-compromised.
Is that also why, for example, you don't accept, I read that you don't accept government money?
Well, governments aren't really, that's Greenpeace actually does that. They don't say they don't accept government money, although they have. But we've never accepted government money. It doesn't mean we wouldn't accept government money. It's just never been offered.
Oh. And how do you find, you have the first crew members that you start the campaigns with. Was it enough money from these two organizations to pay for the ships and to also pay a part of these people, or who gets paid at the beginning? How do you make a living from that at the beginning, if you want, when you start your NGO and Sea Shepherd?
In the beginning, nobody was paid. In fact, my crew had to pay $1,000 to join the ship. And with that $1,000, we were able to buy fuel for the campaigns. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do it. When we got to a point where we didn't have to ask people for that, then we took people on as volunteers without having to pay. So when they join the ship, their food and their board, of course, is covered by Sea Shepherd, and they have to pay their own airfare to join and leave the ship. But and we do pay good engineers and navigators when required, and helicopter pilots when required. But 90% of the crew are volunteers.
Mm-hmm. And how does it go for all for the people setting up NGOs who want to learn from you now? How do you define the other employees, the people taking care of there's still a few people taking care of the administrative things, or you have a CEO for everyone. How do you decide what kind of salary these people get, and especially that they're working you have plenty of different organizations in different countries. So how do you decide, is there a salary framework for these people? Is it totally transparent, for example?
Well, each country makes their own decisions on that. For instance, in Sea Shepherd France, I think there's only 3 employees, and I really don't know what they're paid, but every country makes their own decision based on what the needs are, so it's, I don't really pay that much attention to that particular part of it.
Okay. And what would you say was the hardest part at the start for these, the first, 2-3 campaigns?
Well, I think the hardest part is bureaucratic interference, the fact that governments try to stop your efforts through just petty bureaucratic interventions. You can't do this, you can't do that, or let's see your papers on this, you don't have the proper permits on this. I mean, that's just a constant thing. So we actually had to get to the point where we just learned how to deal with the bureaucrats. And usually the best way to deal with bureaucrats is agree with them and then just do whatever you're going to do anyway.
Okay. So did you always do the papers yourself, or did you at some point, as soon as possible, is it something to say, okay, now I need to find an assistant to do these things and help me?
Well, I try not to do that. I try not to do it myself.
Okay, you were on the sea most of the time.
Well, no, it's just that with the other, I have to delegate. Yeah, when Sea Shepherd started, I was a leader basically, and as an individual. But what we've learned over the years is, you can stop an individual and you can stop an organization, but you can't stop a movement. So that's why Sea Shepherd has become a movement. It's not run by any one individual, including myself. It's in every country there are separate registered entities, and they all work together under the auspices of Sea Shepherd Global. But there's no real leader.
And now that you're talking about the different entities, how do you define which campaigns are going to be like run by which country? Like to decide which campaigns in general on what topics are going to focus?
Well, the countries pick their own campaigns, and Sea Shepherd Global decides whether is in charge of the ships and deploying the ships. So, for instance, Sea Shepherd France wanted to intervene against the killing of dolphins in the Bay of Biscay, so they requested the Sam Simon. So the Sam Simon went up there to France to work with Sea Shepherd France to stop that. So, we have the Bob Barker working with Liberia. We have the Ocean Warrior working with Indonesia. We have 3 of our vessels working in Mexico. And those are all decided by the particular entities at the time, whoever needs them. And also the other consideration is, can we make a difference tactically and strategically? And if we can, then we can get it intervened.
Okay, so you manage the fleet, and the countries manage the operations. So what they decide on what they're going to do.
Sea Shepherd Global out of Amsterdam manages the fleet.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about like leadership. In one of your first campaigns, you said you put an ad that you need a crew, and you had 20 crew members. You had the ship, and you tell the crew that you found the ship that you wanted to disable. And you give the crew the option to leave the ship or to go with you, but maybe end up in prison or get hurt. And you said 17 joined you, and you managed to disable that ship at the time. Do you have a specific recipe for, your motivational speeches? Why do you think people follow you at the risk of their life?
Well, I think there's various motivations. One is people want adventure. The other one is they sincerely want to make a difference. In the early days, though, it was a little difficult. When I left to go after the pirate whaling vessel Sierra, I just put an ad in a paper in Boston, and I got those people. But when push came to shove, they weren't all that dedicated. 17 of them got off the ship, and only 2 of them stayed with me to disable the Sierra. But since then, of course, things have gotten better because word gets out what we do, and people who join us now are much more passionate about what they're doing, and we have fewer dissenters. So it's really hard to say. People join whatever their motivations to join. The one question I ask them is, are you willing to risk your life to protect a whale? And if they say no, then we don't take them. And when people say, well, that's an unreasonable request, and I don't think so. We young people are asked all the time to not only risk their life, but to give their life for real estate and flags and religion and all sorts of things. I think it's a far more noble thing to risk your life to protect an endangered species or a threatened habitat than it is to protect somebody's oil well somewhere.
I totally agree. And talking about recruiting, I'm curious, do you have some kind of interview process at Sea Shepherd, or do people have, in any case, to join the other crew member first, and then you see how it goes?
Oh, no. Well, people get a crew application, and then the crew application is sent to our crewing coordinators, and they do interviews prior to people joining.
Okay, and when you have to do an interview, what would be, after your first favorite question that you just explained, what would be your second, most favorite question to, if you think about people building an NGO here who want to hire better and want to learn from you, what would be your second favorite question that anybody could ask and that you think really helped to understand if people are motivated or understand anything about the people you want to hire?
Well, that's the only question that I ask. The crewing directors have their own questions, which is, usually they're concerned about skills and experience and attitude to see how passionate people are. And they go through those questionnaires. And but almost anybody who really wants to crew will be given the opportunity to do so at some point. Because right from the beginning, I wanted to make it possible for just the average person to be able to participate. And we've had literally about 7,000 crew over the years have joined us, 7,000 volunteers. And they, I can't really speak to their motivations, but most of them, I would say, have done an incredible job. And I think that it's an experience that they remember really all of their lives.
I can see that in the documentaries I've watched, and I remember one episode where one of the Sea Shepherd vessel like stayed during I think 5 days between like a whaler fishing boat and the boat that was there to refuel it, and the captain Peter Hammerstedt on your vessel, so you weren't the captain, he was a captain, said to the whalers, "I won't move my boat, and you will have to sink me right here." And you got your vessel like crushed between the two giant ships in what for me felt like very impressive and scary images.
That wasn't my ship. That wasn't my ship. That was Peter's ship, the Bob Barker. He did an incredible job. That's the kind of passion that we're looking for. And he certainly demonstrated that. Peter joined when he was 18. He's now like in his late 30s, and he rose up from being a deckhand to captain of the ships. And now he's in charge of our African anti-poaching campaigns. So we've had many people who have been with us for many, many years, and so it's really the ones who stay with us are the most passionate ones.
So is this like so Peter started as 18 as a crew member and then went up the hierarchy until like becoming a captain?
Yes.
Okay. And is this always like the way it goes for all your captains at Sea Shepherd, or do sometimes captains join like being captain directly because they were already captain somewhere else or with their own ships?
Well, we've had people who've come from all sorts of backgrounds, merchant marine. One of our captains on the Ocean Warrior last year was the former chief of staff of the Italian Navy. He was actually an admiral. He retired as an admiral and was captaining our vessel, the Ocean Warrior.
And what is your role, for example, now compared to the CEO?
Well, I can't leave the country because Japan has me on the Interpol Red List, which prevents me from traveling. So I'm pretty much locked here. So I spend most of my time either organizing or writing or doing or giving talks.
So is that at that moment that you started to like that you chose I think it's Alex as your CEO because you couldn't do it yourself anymore?
Well, I don't like doing that job.
Okay. And how do you select someone like him to take a key position like that?
Well, in 2002, Alex joined as a cook on board our vessel in the Galapagos, worked his way up through mate and became captain, and now he's our global director.
So it seems that it's more important to you, like the passion and the dedication is more important. Like you have the time to judge the skills of the person during the time he's with you, rather than just hiring someone from outside.
Right. In France, Lamia Samlami, she joined in 2000 and I think she joined in 2005 in the Galapagos, and then she went back to France and organized Sea Shepherd France and built it up by herself. So it's got 19 chapters, French chapters, and she built all of that by herself. And again, that demonstrates an incredible passion to actually be able to do that.
And when it comes to like all these years, I've asked the audience of this podcast to if they had a question for you, and Andrew Stephen asked me to ask you: was there a time during all these years when you thought about quitting, and if you had quit, what would have you done instead?
No, I haven't thought about it. I don't believe in retirement, so I don't see that happening.
And during all these years, what for you would be recalled as the most difficult moment of like Sea Shepherd history?
I haven't really had any difficult moments, I guess. Get arrested a few times, but that's just par for the course. I think just dealing with politics within the conservation movement is probably been the most frustrating thing. But other than that, everything's went quite well.
What was the longest time you were like arrested?
Well, I was 120 days held in Dutch prison on a Norwegian extradition request, which I won. And now it's been a number of years since I haven't been able to travel because of the Japanese Interpol Red List. I was on the Costa Rican Interpol Red List, but they had a change of government and they dismissed the charges against me, which really illustrates how political it is. If it was judicial, they wouldn't be able to do that.
Yes, I've seen that. That's crazy to see that. Again, it's really politics. And that's sad. When it comes to these direct action campaigns, is there some kind of guideline, playbook on how to arrest, to stop poachers without hurting anyone and while respecting the law?
All of the campaigns are designed to make sure that nobody gets hurt. That's why we use stink bombs, for instance. The butyric acid smells horrible, but it's not going to kill you or even injure you. Water cannons, things like that. So we make sure that all of our tactics are designed so that nobody's going to get injured.
When you analyze these campaigns afterwards, what kind of KPIs are you looking at? If you think about the board meeting, what kind of KPIs are they judging in terms of campaign success?
We have global board, and we have every country has their own boards, and I guess they just meet to go over the administrative duties really of what we have to do. You got to file to the government, you got to do the paperwork and that, and also oversee fundraising and things like that. That's what the board does. I mean, the board really doesn't decide on strategies and tactics. Those are more for the captains and crews on the ships.
Yeah, so you're very hands-on and not bureaucratic at all. I'd like to talk a bit now about the communication strategy, because I've learned something very interesting from the documentaries I've seen. You said you need to understand the nature of media and what the media wants, and that there are 4 elements to use. Can you elaborate a bit on that theory and give an example of one of your campaigns using that strategy and these 4 elements, for example?
Well, the media only understands the 4 elements, which are sex, scandal, violence, and celebrity. And every story has one of those elements. If you have, the more elements you have, the bigger the story. One example, the best example, is on a campaign. It had nothing to do with whales or seals, but a campaign I organized to protect wolves in British Columbia in Canada. And we had a story with all 4 elements on it, and we carried the headlines for 2 weeks because of that. The first was they were going to kill wolves and shoot them from helicopters, which is violent. They threatened to kill us if we intervene, which is violent. The environment minister in the province of British Columbia, we caught him taking a bribe from a big game hunting association, so therefore we had the scandal. So I called a media conference, and I recruited Bo Derek as our spokesperson for that campaign. And the place was packed, of course, and cameras and everything. And one reporter for the Vancouver said, "Come on, what does Bo Derek know about wolves? Why is she your spokesperson? This is ridiculous." I said, "Well, if I had the best wolf biologist in the world, Dr. David Meck or Dr. Gordon Haber, this would be an empty room. But I notice it's packed, and you're going to write the story. It's going to be the front page of your newspaper tomorrow, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it because you control the 4 elements." It's the same reason we got so much coverage when we took Bridget Bardot to the ice floes of Newfoundland to protect harp seals. That's why we came up with the TV show Whale Wars. It's very dramatic, and we're selling a message. But in order to sell that message, we have to dramatize what we're doing. Going out and saying we're going to save some whales is all well and good, but people want to be entertained. And that's what the media is really all about, is entertaining. So the news has become entertainment, and entertainment has become the news. That's just the nature of the media. We didn't design the media. We just have to work within the context of the media.
Very, very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that. You said also that your biggest weapon is actually the camera. So how much of what is happening on Sea Shepherd is actually filmed?
The camera is the most powerful weapon ever invented, and everything we do is filmed. We have film crews on every campaign that we do. We have, tens of thousands of meters of film footage of what we've been doing. And, we put together documentaries. We have a number of documentaries are released last year and again this year. And of course, we had a television show, which was the biggest show on Discovery, our Animal Planet on Discovery. And because we understand that if you're going to get your message across, you have to be able to use the media to do so. What's the point of something happening? If it's not on camera, it didn't really happen. That's the nature of it.
And these TV documentaries, do you produce them? So do you pay for them yourself, or do you get them done by the television channels in that case?
No, when we did Whale Wars and Animal Planet, they paid us. and they paid for to put them together. Documentaries being done on us. We don't have to pay to do that. There's a documentary called Watson, which is about myself, which was released last year. We also have Chasing the Thunder, Seaspiracy, which is coming out this year. We had Defend, Conserve, Protect, and Jesus Christ, I can't even keep up with them. But we don't pay for them. They're done by independent producers. That means they're far more objective. We don't control what they say. And Whale Wars, we didn't control what they said or how they edited it, and they didn't tell us what to do.
And how much do you try to get these producers, these documentary makers, to find you and to start to because I know now it's probably easy because people are really aware of who you are, but at the beginning, or let's say for someone starting an NGO right now, how would you approach these documentary makers for them to be interested in you?
Well, we've never approached any documentary makers. They came to us.
How do you convince them to shoot such a big documentary, like a TV show, on you?
By offering them something they can't resist, which is a story, which a drama. What we do is newsworthy.
And in the movie about you that was released last year, one of the journalists you learned from said artists, musicians need to create facts to attract people's attention. So in the movie, we also see you talking to your crew during the campaign against Japanese whalers and saying, one of the tactics we are going to employ is to get people on board and to be held hostage by the Japanese whalers' boat to force them to be in a difficult diplomatic position. So you got 2 crew members on board of the ship. Then you call the marine officials and explain they are taking whales out of the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary in violation of a global moratorium of commercial whaling. We are filming them with an helicopter right now. So how much of your actions or scenarios are planned for you and your team to attract attention?
Well, that was a tactic, and it can only be done using. I had to get Australian citizens to go on board because this was in Australian waters, and I knew that Australia was not going to allow Australian citizens to be taken on board, basically kidnapped and brought back to Japan. They had no choice but to intervene. So it was very important tactically that the people I put on board were Australians.
Okay, so that was a real tactic. So it's the same, as you said, it's part of using the media the right way, and here the government as well. And I know on the other side, the lobbies and the people in power are constantly manipulating the media. So I'd like to talk about that part because it's very interesting. So on your side, do you consider any communication about Sea Shepherd good to have, like positive and negative press, for example?
Yeah, I do. I mean, that's the nature, again, of the media. South Park did a piece on us, which a lot of people thought was anti-Sea Shepherd. And I actually wrote a letter to them thanking them for it, and that really bothered them. Trey Parker, one of the producers or one of the directors on South Park, he said his exact words were, "Watson's a fucking liar if he says that he liked the show." And I said, "Well, of course I like the show. You put me on the same level as Tom Cruise and the Scientologists and all these other guys. You basically legitimize what we were doing. You guys don't say anything good about anybody. So if I'm one of those people you're not saying anything good about, that's on the same level as all the rest of them. So you did us a favor." But they didn't really understand that. It's as what was it? Oscar Wilde once said, "The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about." It doesn't matter what they say. I'm not really concerned about people's criticisms. It means nothing to me. My clients are not people. My clients are whales and seals and dolphins and sharks, and those are who I represent. So if people like what we do or they don't like what we do, I don't really care. It doesn't bother me at all. I don't do it for them.
So the results and the awareness is the most important to you. And when I will take a football analogy. I don't know how much you are into football, but that's the first one that came to my mind when I thought about this. Is in football, most of the time there might be a fault at some point, But even though the fault is very like is tiny, the players usually like just amplify the tiny shock they receive, and so there is a fault. Like someone cut their way, and like but the person could have jumped above the person, tried to avoid it, but they just use that opportunity to get the other penalized. And and in your documentary, Watson, you had one of the people who inspired you, I think, a journalist, who said that sometimes you have to create facts. So how far can you go to create facts to raise awareness to your cause and actions? For example, in your direct actions, would you say to your crew, if anyone gets a tiny bit pushed by a poacher or, one of these bad guys, just let yourself be pushed or throw yourself in the water and we will film it?
Well, that's happened. The people who have been thrown in the water by poachers volunteered to do that.
Okay, so that was like you had planned it.
Sometimes they're planned, yeah. Okay. And you do take precautions, but sometimes they're not planned. Sometimes things happen.
And that's part of the strategy to, of course, get the negative like repercussions or consequences. It's at the end of the day, it's just more awareness for you.
Well, also I should point out that the getting media attention and creating awareness is secondary to what we do. Our primary objective is to shut them down. So getting the Japanese out of the Southern Ocean was our objective. The whale wars was a means of telling the world about what we were doing and helping to raise funds in order to make that a possibility. So when you get your message out to the world, then you get support, and that's what we were doing for that reason.
And that actually works. When was the TV show Whale Wars shot?
From 2007 to 2016.
16, and so it took like almost 14 years for the whaling industry to almost stop.
Yeah, but every year we managed to cut down their quotas significantly. At one year they only took 10%.
Yeah, again, I can't thank you enough for that, and I'm really respectful for that. One question about the last one about that topic about the haters. The difference here, with the new media right now, 20 years ago, you barely had to talk with your haters, so it was just directly on the press. You wouldn't like see it directly. But now with the social media, you have a lot of haters that pop up. And what's your strategy with that?
No, I ignore them and send them to the dungeon.
Okay.
What happens is that I just ignore, block, and delete. So right now on my Facebook thing, I've got, I think, about 7,000 people in the banned section. I just send them there. I never hear from them again. And so I don't get many people criticizing me because as soon as any negativity comes on board, I just send them there and never to hear from them again. Call it the phantom zone, I suppose. But I haven't got the time or the patience to deal with these people. And so now they virtually don't exist. I don't hear from anybody really in that respect.
Okay. And why, when you said on your social media, why do you have a separate website right now? Like, is it part of this personal branding? How important is it for you, and how does it contribute to Sea Shepherd to have your own website as Paul Watson, and like in comparison to Sea Shepherd and your own social media?
Well, Sea Shepherd has literally over 100 Facebook pages, and I'm one of them. There's 750,000 people on my page. There's 1 million on Sea Shepherd Global's. So every ship has their own Facebook page, their own social network, run by the crews. So it reaches a lot of people. And
you don't have a kind of a marketing department. It's the same thing as well. Every country has their own owns their own social media and do whatever they want.
Yeah, they have their own merchandising e-stores. Sea Shepherd UK, Sea Shepherd France.
And how do you manage the communication, like consistency, through all these like entities? Do you have some kind of guidelines for that?
Not really. We all just agree. They're all coming. There's an umbrella group, which is Sea Shepherd Global, and it oversees the operations of all these different groups. But everybody gets along. We haven't had any problems.
So you never had any, like, everybody who stays always, you never had to correct any message. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do with their social media.
Oh, every once in a while, you have to correct an individual here or there if they get off on a tangent or something weird or something. But other than that, everything's, we're pretty tolerant overall.
Okay, and in terms of like campaign itself, what is your favorite campaign, like operational campaign in all these years? What is the one that you are the proudest of?
I don't really have a favorite campaign. We get very much involved in every campaign that we do. And at the time that we're doing the campaign, that is the favorite campaign. That's the one that our energies are going into. And then, you go on to the next one. So you don't drag one after another. What you do is you're involved in the present. You're not involved in the past, and you're not involved in the future. The most valuable lesson I learned, one of the most valuable lessons I learned was back in 1973 when I served as a medic for the American Indian movement during the occupation of Wounded Knee in South Dakota. We were surrounded by, 3,000 federal troops that were shooting at us. We didn't have any hope of winning this at all. And I went to Russell Means, who was the leader of the American Indian movement. I said, look, Russell, what are we doing here? We can't win. We can't beat these guys, or there's just no way. We're outnumbered. The odds are against us. And he said, well, we're not concerned about the odds against us, and we're not concerned about winning or losing. We're here because this is the right place to be, the right thing to do, and the right time to do it. So don't worry about the future. It's all summed up in the Lakota words, Hokahe, it's a good day to die. Pay attention to what you're doing today. That will define what the future will be. So you have to be in the now, not in the past, not in the present, not in the future.
Great advice. That was one of the questions I wanted to ask, like the bonus questions. So thank you for already sharing it. One of the thing I'd like to talk about is about mission in general. How do you dictate, or how have you defined the mission from the beginning to now? Did it change at some point, or is it always the same? And can you elaborate a bit on that?
Well, Sea Shepherd's an interventionist anti-poaching organization, a marine conservation anti-poaching organization. That's what it began as, and that's what it continues to be. The difference is now that we've grown to or evolved so that we're now working in partnership with governments around the world, and that's made us much more effective.
And talking about the last questions to finish this interview, with everything you've learned during all these years, what would you do differently if you had to start Sea Shepherd again?
I don't know, probably do the same thing, but you can't. But it's a different time. I mean, what you could do in the 70s, what you could do in the 80s, you can't do anymore. Society was much more tolerant of activism then. It's becoming more and more intolerant now. So you really have to define your strategies and your tactics in the context of the times that you're living in and the societies that you're working within.
And what would be one book that you'd recommend to the entrepreneurs out there who are starting a startup or NGO with a sustainable or a social goal?
Well, I do have a book called Earth Force. It's a guide to strategy for environmental warriors.
Last question for you to speak to our audience. If people want to know more about you or your projects, what should they do? How can they get involved if they want to help Sea Shepherd or support your organization? Where should they get more information?
Well, we're pretty easy to get in touch with. Just seashepherd.org for our website, or Sea Shepherd on Facebook or Instagram or anywhere. We're pretty easy to get in touch with.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you so much for your time today, for your invaluable tips. And one more time, thank you again for doing what you've done for the oceans. Long live Sea Shepherd. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Okay, thank you.
If you like this podcast, there are two things you can do that would mean the world to me. The first thing is to sign up for the podcast newsletter. That way you will be notified of the new episodes, but you will also get a summary of the learnings at the end of every season. Plus, for each episode, you will get the resources and the list of do's and don'ts that every guest shares with me. And finally, you will also get the opportunity to ask our future guests one question in advance. You can sign up for this newsletter on gtimpact.com. The second thing you can do to be super helpful is to recommend this podcast. For that, you can write a review on Apple Podcasts and share the podcast with your friends, other entrepreneurs, and people trying to build a sustainable future. That way, we can all learn together and work on a brighter future for us, our children, and our planet. Thank you very much, and see you next week for the next episode. Have a nice day.